Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, the podcast where mothers share their powerful stories of healing and empowerment. I am your host, Amanda Quick, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and advocate. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of mothers who have overcome adversity, found their fierce feminine power, and embraced transformative parenting. Whether you're a mother driven to fight for your children or someone with a story burning inside you, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll explore themes of resilience, self-trust, and healing from our traumatic experiences, all spotlighting the profound journeys of awakened mothers. Join us for a space of naked authenticity, deep inspiration, and genuine connection. Embrace the divine feminine and discover your own warrior mama within. Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Awakened Motherhood. I'm your host, Amanda Quick, and today I am super excited to introduce our guest. Her name is Foster Wilson. She is a poet, author, and postpartum doula whose work bridges creativity, care, and connection. Her debut poetry collection, Afternoon Abundance, Poetry for Wild Souls, explores identity, spirituality, and the transformative journey of motherhood. With an award-winning career in independent film and a BFA from NYU Tisch School of the Arts, Foster brings a cinematic eye and soulful perspective to everything she creates. As a doula, she supports birthing people through life's most profound transitions, blending empathy with advocacy. A mother of two and contributor to the Drill magazine, Foster is dedicated to nurturing authentic conversations on creativity, equity, and the human experience. Oh my goodness, you are a busy woman. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am busy, but it all feels like a lovely journey down this life's path that's taken me. So thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always, some people give you teeny bios, some people give you big ones, and it always, brings out these different pieces. And your journey is quite, layers and shifts. And so I'm excited to dig in because there's a whole lot of different components here.
Yeah, a whole lot. And that's just kind of, my creative and work life, but there's also a whole lot of personal stuff, which I know you like to get into. So
absolutely. Because you're a, mother yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you do all that on top of, raising kids.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on this show, we kind of just start wherever you're comfortable starting. So wherever, it feels like the right place to talk about the person you were before a lot of these things happened. And, what were the beliefs you held about yourself? What was life like?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, I think I've had probably two big quakes in my life that really redefined who I was and really questioned a lot of what I believed was true. But it really was just finding a deeper part of myself and uncovering that. So, I grew up in the woods of North Carolina, a very hippie family. We were homeschooled for a long time, and I had a really beautiful childhood. And kind of really knew my path. I wanted to be an actor. I was going to go to NYU for school, and this was something I really definitely wanted, and I could do anything I put my mind to and all of that. But I felt like my life was kind of laid out for me, and I was pursuing my dreams. I don't know that I was actually happy, but I was doing a lot. I was a doer. I'm an Enneagram 3. If you speak that language, I'm a generator in human design. So,
you and I are very similar. I'm also a generator.
Mm-hmm.
I also do. I also am very good at just pushing harder and making it happen.
Yeah, make it happen, muscle through. And so, I went to college. I pursued acting. I moved out to LA with my then boyfriend, partner, and then we got married and had my first daughter. And that was really beautiful kind of journey into motherhood. I certainly had an element of things starting to not go the way I had planned as I think is many, many people's journey through the pregnancy portion, birth portion, postpartum. There's going to be a quake there somewhere that affects you. For me, I intended to have a home birth with her. I was very into everything being very natural. I had a midwife, and then everything was going great. And at 37 weeks, we found out that I had cholestasis of the liver and a lot of itching in my hands and my feet. And my baby was also breech at that point, and I had done a lot to try to turn her, moxibustion, and I had a version at home, which is a manual turning of the baby that was unsuccessful. And so, because the cholestasis was so dangerous for the baby, we ended up electing to have a cesarean birth. We really didn't have much of a choice, but that was where we went for her safety and mine. So cesarean birth, certainly not what I expected. And it was the beginning of like, oh, I'm not in control anymore. Right. I
Oh, is that
know.
something motherhood brings us all?
Right. It
Just
just is.
Mhm.
I work with postpartum clients all the time, and there is such a element of a difficult journey in the realizing that you don't even know when your baby's going to be born. To
Right.
start with that piece of I just don't
Right.
know and sitting in the unknown. Um,
And it's
so
so
yeah,
uncomfortable, right? You've planned, you've created, you've all the things. There's a date.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. They give you a specific
They do.
date, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When in reality, as a mother and anyone who works in birth, you know that the typical range is actually 5 weeks, and it could be outside of that as well. Um, so this was the beginning of me starting to learn that I wasn't in control anymore, but I resisted that pretty hard. I really had very deep intentions for what I wanted to be as a mother, held to my principles very strongly, what I believed was right for her. And I still believe those are good things for her, and I'm proud of how I've been raising her. But um, I still believed I was in charge. I don't think the lesson had fully been learned. Um, I was also somebody who was working, although I came here to be an actor, I was working a sort of a day job in administration, and I definitely worked myself to the bone.
Mhm.
I worked from home, which is beautiful, but that meant that I could work anytime I wanted. And those were very late nights when I had a toddler running around. And um, I was in burnout mode kind of always. And I
Mhm.
think in deeply inside, I believed that that was what was my worth was
Mhm.
in working hard.
You
Um,
had to do more to be valued.
yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
doer. And
Yeah.
that um, was how I was trying to seek validation, how I was trying to
Mhm.
feel my own worth. Um,
Mhm.
and it's a hamster wheel that I
Yeah.
just wasn't living fully. I wasn't happy. I would never acknowledge that I wasn't happy, but I was tired and I was um, not fulfilled energetically. I was also not a spiritual person at the time. I sort of loosely believed in something bigger, but I didn't tap into any of that. And my partner was atheist. So there was a lot of
Very
like,
similar in my journey. I was
mm,
agnostic. Like, yeah, there's something. I don't know what it is. I'm not
yeah,
looking at it.
yeah. And I never explored that. I never tapped into
Yeah.
that for a long time. So um, when my daughter Emma was 2, we tried to get pregnant again. We got pregnant right away. Our plan was always to have 2 children, and this pregnancy was going smoothly. We were again with a midwife, and at about 20 weeks was the first time we had an ultrasound because we've been under the midwifery model of care, and they don't do ultrasounds usually.
Mhm.
Um, we went in to get the ultrasound, and the technician was really quiet. Um, I immediately knew something was wrong, but I think I hadn't known in the hours leading up to it. I was just really, really anxious, and that's not really my MO. So something felt off to me. Um, and I kept saying, what is it? What are you seeing? Because there was a heartbeat and there was everything looked fine to me from my end. And the technician was like, the doctor will interpret these results or something very vague. And we were pulled into another room and we were told that our baby had fluid all around his lungs and his brain. They were showing us on the scan. He was basically swollen. And we didn't quite know what that meant. We were told there were a couple of options. It was either viral or chromosomal, one of which meant no quality of life, or this baby would not survive. And one of which meant maybe it's a virus and he's something that there's a cure for. We went down a long journey for about 4 weeks of trying to figure out which of these things it was. We had an amniocentesis. He was not. It was actually neither of those two things. So we didn't know. We were just crossing things off a list that we never had. We didn't know what this list was, but there was a doctor crossing things off. And we were talking to people in Chile. It was just a really terrifying and exhausting experience, and just sitting with so much unknown. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting with my midwife. She was just holding space for us. We were just having a conversation. We were distraught. And she said, "It sounds like you're seeking clarity." And
of course.
Yeah. And but I remember it so well because I couldn't even put words to what that experience was like, except to say it was so untangible. I didn't know what I was looking at. About 23, 24 weeks, we finally had a neonatal specialist who said to us, "We've pretty much eliminated everything on this list. The rest of what's here does not have a viability. Mm-hmm. You can carry this baby to term and let him go on his own whenever he decides, or you could give birth and you could possibly give birth to him, and he might live a week or two at best." The fluid around his lungs was causing his lungs to not develop. So he would have 18-week-old lungs, 15-week-old lungs, just not, he wouldn't be able to live. And so we made this very difficult decision to terminate the pregnancy. And the doctor said, this is what I would do if it were my wife or my sister, which I think helped give us both a little bit of clarity, but also my life was at risk with this. There's something called mirror syndrome, where if he is swollen, then my body could start to swell, and that would put me at risk for preeclampsia. So all signs sort of pointed to this decision that felt like a decision I do not want to make. I wanted this, if this is going to go down the road of losing this baby, I wanted it to be like in the power of the universe or in the baby to make this choice. But for me to make that decision was really excruciating. And I also think brave in some way. I had to do what was best for my family and for my daughter to be going through all of that and going to the hospital while this baby was in the process of dying. I couldn't see that.
And she's 2, right?
She was 2. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to pause here for a minute and really just acknowledge you, because 23, 24 weeks, you're halfway through, more than halfway through your pregnancy. You've gender, you have all these plans and ideas of who this baby is going to be, what the relationship with their siblings are going to be. I mean, you built up a lot.
Yeah.
And then having to sit in this unknown and this unknown territory, because the medical world is, they're not always the best about being clear, and they're trying not to scare you, and at the same time you feel like they're keeping things from you. So there's like all of these things happening at once, and holding all of that, and then having to make this impossible decision, truthfully. And I have made different impossible decisions in my life, but not a whole lot of people, at least that I know, are talking about making this decision at this point in pregnancy. People who have chosen termination usually do so very early on, before they've developed this whole relationship. And, I think it's really important to acknowledge you for that decision there, in understanding how important it was to take care of you, take care of your daughter, and in a lot of ways, prevent further suffering for your son.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That is how I see it. For me, this felt like the best choice for my son, for my daughter, and for my family. Yeah. I don't know that I saw it as the best choice for me. That sort of comes with like a choice I made later on in my life. Sure. This really felt like like I was making the best choice for the family, and each of my kids individually. Um, yeah, to paint the picture, it was very far along. I was
Mhm.
second pregnancy, so 6 months pregnant. I was already huge. I was showing, everyone knew, um, and he was so we were on the edge of whether or not this would be a D&C, or a vaginal delivery, because that marker usually comes around 24 weeks, where they say after 24 weeks, you do have to deliver. But because he was so swollen, he was actually much bigger, and we did have to do a delivery. But that would have been my choice anyway. There was something in the process of like going under and coming up and no longer being pregnant that I needed my body and my mind and my
Mhm.
everything to experience this loss to be able to process it. So for me personally, and I fully understand anyone's choice to do something different, for me, I needed to have that experience. And in the birth, to break it down, the way it works at a loss like this is that I'm lucky enough to live in California. I remember very specifically our doctor saying, if you were in a different state, perhaps this would be a very complicated process. You might have to go outside of insurance. You might have to go to
Wow.
a facility you don't want to be at or another state to get this to happen. And this was 9 years ago. Um, but here in
Which would be
California,
a totally different impossibility in some places today.
exactly. So I felt very lucky in that moment. He said, I'm writing this up as a fatal diagnosis, in which case you can take it to UCLA and you can have this procedure done. So there's one day of an injection where his heart was stopped. And I remember that whole 24 hours after waiting to go to the labor and delivery the next day to be induced, just sitting with this terrifying thought of I don't know when he's going to pass and I won't know this human that's living within me, um, that I won't know when he's gone. And that was just heartbreaking. And the next day we went to labor and delivery. Um, and I very much wanted to feel all of the feelings, emotionally and physically, of giving birth. Um, I had had a cesarean previously,
Right.
so I hadn't gone through a trial of labor. And I kind of just wanted that. So for a good long while, I went without the epidural, um, because it was like this pain that was inside. I needed to feel it in my body, and it became sort of a lifelong search for embodiment, um, that I still am seeking today. But I after I don't remember how many hours, at a certain point, I said to my midwife over the phone, "Can I get the epidural now? Because this is like an unbearable amount of like emotional and physical strain." And she was like, "Of course." Um, so I did get an epidural in the end. I love talking about birth, so even though this is a tragic situation, I like to unpack both stories
You're
deeply.
still, I completely, and I think all moms, I know I've written my own birth stories multiple times, and um, processing it as a whole, it's a very unique experience that not somebody who's not a mom doesn't entirely understand.
Exactly. Yeah. So I delivered him and held him for many hours after, and then began the both postpartum and grieving process of having lost. Um, I, and there's these things no one talks about, right? You're in the labor and delivery room, and then someone comes in thinking there's a woman giving birth to a live baby, and they have a certain energy about them.
Hmm.
So they had to put a sign on the door, like, this is what's going on here. Do not come in with like a happy face, kind of a thing. Um,
Right. No, no, congratulations.
yeah, exactly. There's, you have to think about loss. You have to think about remains, and you have to think about, what are we doing with the remains and cremation and all of this stuff. And then there's other postpartum things that I did not expect. No one told me my milk was going to come in. I didn't have a baby nursing, but I nursed before. So my milk came in at 3 to 5 days, and it felt like such a slap on the face. Like, I still,
Right. There's no
my
baby to
body,
feed this to.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And so I'm leaking and I'm engorged. And I had read that other folks who had had stillbirth like would pump and donate their milk, which I
Hmm.
thought was so beautiful. And I felt so guilty that I didn't want to do that. It was going to be too painful for me to continue doing that. And I wished I could because I wanted there to be some good coming out of his life. Um, but I couldn't emotionally take it. Um, and so, there was a moment of engorgement, and one of the natural treatments for engorgement is to stick frozen cabbage leaves in your
Hmm.
bra. Mm,
Hmm.
and there's properties in the cabbage, and the frozen part helps. And I had them in there in the morning, and I forgot about them, and I went for a short walk, and it was hot. It was like August, September. And I was like, "What is that smell? What is that smell?" It's like somebody's cooking something, and the cabbage leaves had gotten so hot and warm, they had, like, partially cooked, and I was like, "Okay, of course." Like, add insult to injury. Um, but yeah, so in this process, it was a deeply grieving process, and um I felt very isolated, and that ironically, because we had enlisted all of our friends and family who all knew about this pregnancy and this baby. We enlisted them to support us. We'd let them know what happened. And I had an incredible amount of support, and it was beautiful. And yet I didn't want to be around anybody. I felt
Yeah.
like I was the only one who knew what it was like. I felt like I was the only one who really knew him. Um, and as hard as that was, it felt like to me in the moment that my roots of this tree that I'm growing here, my roots were digging deeper and deeper into the ground. It was very dark. It was depressing. It was, um, you know, uh, just you can't see the light out of it. But in growing those roots, I felt like I knew where I was and I knew who I was. And I had touched this deep place in me that allowed me to then down the road be able to see other people in their grief, in their pain. And I don't know their exact pain, but I know I've been to that place in me and I can hold that space for you. Um,
Yeah.
which might have been one of the biggest lessons in this whole experience.
Yeah. I think anybody who has gone through those deep depths of the darkness, once, not while we're there, we can't see it. No. Um, and anybody who's there, we will never tell you that there will be positive things on the other side because that is not the time to go there. But it is one of the most profound gifts for me as well that I can hold space for that level of darkness myself now today, even though I'm not there anymore because I have been there and I know exactly what it's like. And it brings a different level of compassion and empathy that I didn't have before.
Yeah. Same, same. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of
And
the, oh, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, from a loss perspective and losing a child, losing, an infant, those are some of the most painful experiences any mother will go through. And having to make decisions about that on top of it and feeling guilty on some level that, you made that choice. And at the same time, knowing it was the right choice has to bring just a whole nother level that even those who've lost a child after the fact wouldn't necessarily have experienced either. Like there's an even deeper darkness there. And, I just want to acknowledge you again for bringing this to the light now and sharing this with others.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that it was a power I didn't want to have, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and being so far along, one of the things that became clear to me is that because I was so far along and I was showing in this big way, I hadn't done any kind of like announcement, but I I felt like it was my journey and my sort of obligation to tell people and to
Mhm.
bring the whole story to conversation right away. Um, there's a lot of people that don't want to make that decision, which is wonderful. Um, and I think there's a lot of early loss, abortion, termination, miscarriage, all of that happens in a place where it could still be private.
Mhm.
You could have the
Mhm.
choice to whether or not you're going to talk about it or not.
Yeah.
I was under I was in a position where I didn't want to run into somebody at the grocery store who knew I was pregnant and start congratulating me, "Where's the baby? Da da da," because I'm not pregnant anymore. I wanted
Yeah.
to avoid as many of those situations as possible, not only for myself, but for that person too. That is a normal assumption to make, and
Right.
that person would probably feel terrible when they found out. And I'm here having the grocery store having to tell you. So we tried to get ahead of that and sent like this huge email to everyone we knew pretty much, and was public on social media as well. Um and that became like it almost forced my hand, but I felt like in a way that I could handle it. Um and in doing so, my goodness, the number of people that came out of the woodwork to tell me their personal story
Mhm.
that maybe
Mhm.
they hadn't shared with many other people. It was
Mhm.
on and on and on. People losses from 30 years ago, losses from 6 months ago, people I knew well who I had no idea this was part of their story. Um, and in that, I felt really, really grateful to my son for letting all of that kind of unearth itself into the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And there's many people who've done that, but it just in my community, it felt like, okay, this is part of the healing process for everyone and healing for the community.
Absolutely. No, I completely relate. I think I told you when we first met, I've had 7 pregnancies and I have 3 children, and some of those were my choice and some of those were not. And but they were all early enough along that it wasn't obvious. And that doesn't mean nobody knew, but it was a smaller group of people that had to be untold in the sense. And, at the same time, you're going through life and there's a being and then there isn't a being, and you're going through all of this process, and you don't want to go around plastering it everywhere because that doesn't also feel appropriate. And at the same time, there's so much you're feeling. And so it's almost like what it feels like to me, at least, is you, by sharing what happened, because on some level you were protecting yourself and them by doing so, you invited everybody else to dig up all this stuff that they never felt like they could talk about because, whether they never went to therapy or it just never came up again. They only ever grieved on their own, and they never really, or they shoved it on and didn't do any of that, which is a lot of the case in history. And giving people that opportunity. I mean, I still have people come to me today. In fact, this week, a woman found me on social media and needed to talk to me about her story because my story related to her. I mean, I'm sure it continues to happen. Maybe not everybody in your direct vicinity now, but it will continue to happen to invite more of these stories to come out. And I know for me, hearing other people receive so much healing from just knowing they weren't alone, like it reflects back and helps me too.
Yeah. Yeah. At the time, there was a woman, I think my midwife pointed me to, who was on social media who had lost a baby and had done a lot of public work after. And I was in those like tumultuous weeks, I was consuming everything that she had written about
Mm.
her baby and everything she had done. And I don't know her at all, but I still can see her face in my mind because I was holding on to this, um, you know, kind of an expander in a way of somebody who'd been
Mm.
through it and was okay on the other side. Um, and she was honoring her baby constantly. And that was something that I was seeking, was how do I honor him? How do I continue to speak his name? I still have one or two people that will text me on his birthday each year.
Aw.
And it's so interesting because, like, the first year, quite a lot of people remembered. We actually sent out cards that said, his name is Wild with an E. And we sent out like announcement cards that said, it was a picture of me pregnant and said, here's his name and the date we said he was set free. And it, I still get people who text me, and now it's 9 years later. I think there's one or two people who remember. Um, but it meant a lot when people remembered his name, and I keep him in conversation. My children keep him in conversation. But for me, that was really important. And there's a lot of different people feel differently about that, of course. But that was important to me to make meaning of this loss and to try to figure out how this life was going to be different after having experienced that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And, my losses were all early enough. There wasn't names. I don't know genders. I didn't develop a person in my mind, but there was there was value at every single one of those experiences for me, for the relationships I was in, for, the whole subset of things at the time. And, it's interesting looking back, had those been later experiences, there's a different experience there. There's a different set of healing. There's a different set of understanding. And it doesn't matter when when the loss occurs, the experience is still a loss. And what we take from it is so individual, right? It's so unique how we process. And at the same time, we all need to share those things. And we all need to be witnessed in those deep places.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much in that. There's such a different kind of grief when it comes to like infertility, or someone who's experienced many early losses. That's a really different kind of pain, because I had been pregnant and given birth before, and I had easily gotten pregnant. So it was the hope that we would have another baby was still very tangible to me,
Yeah.
and that's can be just totally different for someone experiencing ongoing infertility.
Right.
It's lost in its own way, even if you never conceive. Like the loss of the hope, and every month is hopeful, even if you never have like sperm meet egg.
Yeah. No, every cycle is a loss, right? That people have. And that's also not my story. I have the opposite issue. And, but it means that I have more of these other type of losses in a different way because, I've gotten pregnant when I didn't want to be in different instances. And at the same time, I've also had pregnancies that I did want that did not come to fruition. And so obviously this informed a lot of your postpartum doula work now. Going through this and being able to hold space. Do you specifically work with people during loss or all postpartum experiences?
So I haven't yet directly as a postpartum doula. It is something I offer, but what happened is throughout the years after losing Wild, people in my community would reach out to me if they knew someone who was going through something really hard. And that was my community work. I was operating unintentionally as like a community loss doula. I would be talking to people on the phone, walking them through things, checking in with them through the process. I had the privilege of having lots of support and therapy in the months and years after his birth and loss. So I felt very healed, and being around other people who had lost was not triggering to me at all. It felt like a beautiful experience. So for me, I welcomed all of those calls, and going for a walk with somebody and trying to just check in on them. I didn't start working in birth and postpartum until a couple of years ago. And that's a long time calling of being interested in birth. And as you can tell, I can go into great detail. And something I had pushed aside in my mind because my soul was calling. It was calling to me, but I had all of these other aspirations and all of these other plans. And when I finally let go of the reins and said, okay, let me go pursue this, I train as a full spectrum doula. So that includes birth, postpartum, abortion, and loss. and I have that full range, but I really fell in love with the postpartum part of birth work. And so I primarily focus on that. Um, I have not yet had a call for loss doula work, but there is postpartum in loss. And there is also grief in postpartum, even with
Yes.
a healthy living baby. So I do find those are very tightly integrated. And I talk a lot with my clients about grieving the loss of your old self, your
Mhm.
single childless self, if you're becoming a parent of two now, what it's like to be, now a parent of two and losing the mom that could just focus entirely on this one being. So there's a lot of that in the work I do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I mean, every new birth experience, no matter the outcome, is a rebirth of the mother, right? It's a complete rebirth of who you are, whether you are ready for that or not. It comes, whether you're the childless self or even after each loss, it's another rebirth of some experience you've had. And parent of one, parent of two, parent of three in my case. And all of those things were huge identity shifts for me.
Yeah, I was going to say it's such a question of identity. I will never forget when a very good friend of mine was helping me through the process of grieving. Um, she said her sister had experienced something similar, not as late term of a loss, but a loss, miscarriage. And she said, I thought I would get to choose my identity. I, I get to choose that I'm this career, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a
Oh
whatever,
my
right?
gosh. I thought the
And
same thing. I'm going to be an independent woman. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to do these
mm,
things.
in so many ways, we get to choose the careers and titles we give ourselves. But she said to me, "You are now forever a mother who lost, and that's not an identity you got to choose." And that broke me, man. I I I didn't want that identity, and now I do because it's part of my story.
Sure.
But that's a real challenging thing to receive the identity that has been given to you.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't want to be, yeah, it's
Yeah.
so, it's such a lesson, man. It's such a lesson.
Yeah. There are the identities I have chosen and identities I have not. I 100%. And, even the ones that I believed I was choosing still got transformed in a way that I didn't choose. I had all the ideas of what early motherhood was going to look like, and none of it was how it actually happened. And it was a huge lesson for me as well. And I think a lot of people and listeners who are the stronghold, I'm going to do this and we're going to make this happen. It's it's such a shift in how we've operated our whole lives to
Right.
really have to surrender into this new identity we didn't choose. And yet we can feel the power in it, even at the same time. And we're starting to get to the point of understanding it, even while we're going through that process. And it's not a linear healing process. It's not we just check these boxes and we're fixed. It's this circle and in and out and backwards sort of thing that we skip pieces of understanding. And we meet somebody and it brings up a new layer we hadn't yet felt, or we didn't want to, or whatever the things happen that evolves. And I know for me, I don't get triggered either anymore about things that I've been through, but there are still pieces I'm uncovering about what led me to those certain experiences and what parts I played in it and what beliefs I'm still holding because of some of these things that happened. And, it's almost to me now, it's like I'm looking for all of the extra gifts in this package I didn't want. I'm like, okay, I've received it. I've accepted it. What else can I utilize in here that's going to make this something that I actually do want to fully embody? And our stories are very different in challenge, but there's a lot of similarities in the healing process. And sharing our stories and helping other people who've gone through similar things. And I think that's really amazing. And I'm curious if, what would you tell yourself now, after you've gone through this? What did you really need to hear that maybe you didn't hear until much later? And, what would you how would you support that previous version of you today?
Man, that's such a good question. Um, I really think that younger self needed to understand that you said that this is an act of surrender, and in trusting that there's something more powerful at play here that we
Yeah.
can't understand. Um, Surrender has been a key pivotal word for me in my life since then, in particular in the last 3 years. Um, I think it's an act of if you're in a canoe and you're paddling and you realize you're working so hard to get somewhere, what happens when you just pull the oars in the
Mhm.
boat and you sit back and let things happen? There's an element of ease that I didn't understand the beauty of until
Mhm.
more recently, in the act of surrender. Uh, Incredible things in my life have happened when I just let go and
Mhm.
let the
Mhm.
cards kind of fall. Um, and I think that goes back to that original limiting belief that I am in control and I am the one who makes my own power and my worth is in the doing. If
Yeah.
I do less, I be more, right? I just am,
Mhm.
and I feel more, and I let the universe just sort of take me on this ride. Um, I don't know if she would have heard it, but that is what I would want to tell
That's
her.
what you would want her to say. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I would
love
wanna
I
let
love
her
your
know.
analogy. You're floating in a canoe. And I always feel like the universe chooses the river. You get to choose how you navigate the river. Do you fight it? Do you try to swim upstream? Do you relax and accept what comes and, just gently lean one direction or the other? You get to choose that part, but you don't necessarily get to choose, you know, the way the rapids go.
Exactly, exactly, and I think too, there's, you can I just always believed like, "Oh, there's point B, and I'm here at point A, and I'm just gonna get there by hell or high water," right? And by focusing so much, I probably could get there. I probably could get there. I don't know how fun it would be, but I've missed, like, the 360 view that's all
Yeah.
around me and this gift that's waiting off in left field, right? And, um, things I could never imagine. Recently, I was kind of reevaluating, what do I want to do in this upcoming year? And I forgot to like want for things because I've had just a really incredible year. And I, I'm like, oh, what am I even wanting right now? What am I even tackling? And I remember being a kid at Christmas and my parents saying, what do you want Santa to bring you? And I'm like, I, I the offer was, do you want to tell Santa what you want, or do you want it to be a surprise?" And so
Mhm.
many years I just kept saying, "I want a surprise. I want a surprise for Christmas." And I said that many years, and I kind of feel like that now. I'm like, "All right, I got a vague idea of where I'm headed, but I would also just really like surprise in this life, and I'm open to what you have to bring me."
Well, and what a beautiful thing to trust in the surprise now, right? After going through so many trials of surrender, that the surprise is better than anything you could have ever asked for.
Right, always. Always.
Always, always. And I know that showed up in my life too. It's you just stop fighting everything and go down and you let go and you let it unfold for you. And that's the craziest thing, but you really do let it unfold for you. And when you can get there, even with new challenges because, you said that was 9 years ago now. I'm sure there's new challenges that have occurred in your life since, but do you approach them differently? I'm guessing, you have a different set of tools and understandings now because of all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's um it's so much quicker for me now when
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
see something coming that I don't like and I want to resist. I think so much of our suffering exists in the resistance to what's here,
Yes.
the resistance to the feeling. I don't want to feel angry. I don't want to feel sad. That's where our suffering is. Whereas, okay, here's the feeling coming up for me. Okay, here's the experience that's in front of me. I don't have a choice in the matter. Let me just pull the oars in and go with it. Um, then it passes through you. You're
Mhm.
through those parts of the rapid, to keep the
Yeah.
metaphor going.
Yeah.
Um, it, and you're not fighting the rapid constantly. You're just, all right, I'm through that rocky part and now I'm on to the next thing, because we are evolving beings. We are constantly changing. Physically, our bodies are always changing. We're aging, we're getting stronger, weaker, everything's changing. Um, and we don't, as human beings, like that so much. We're resistant to the change, but it's going to happen. So yeah, I'm much, much quicker now at when something comes into my orbit being like, all right, I have faith that there's some reason for this, and I'm just going to let it happen, go through it and see what's on the other side.
Well, that is truly a very beautiful gift that your son gave you. And I don't know if you have explored mediumship or trying to communicate with him in other ways, but that's the message I receive right now for you is just that was a lot of his purpose to teach you and to teach others through you.
Thank you. Yes, I believe that fully, and I have a lot of my own communication with him. So
Good.
I'm very grateful for everything he has given me in this life. I thank him constantly, and new things keep coming, as you say. The gifts that you're looking
Yeah.
for, like, they just keep
Yeah.
coming. Like, oh my gosh, this would not have happened if it not been for this reason.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be the person I am today either, and at this point, I wouldn't trade it. Back then, I probably would have, but, today, now, I was being interviewed by a podcast once, and he said something to me, and I've repeated this a few times because it's so true, that the why is always in the future. Like, when we go, "Why is this happening to me?" We don't have the why is not in the present. The why comes in the future, and if we can have faith that it's coming, and we can relax and try to stop seeking all of this understanding and clarity that isn't available to us in the present, then we can allow for that why to unfold and to surprise us in the magic of it. And I truly believe that so much, kind of to your point, so much of the suffering and the illness and all of the things that people struggle with is in that fight against all of these components of ways they cannot control their reality and the ways things happen to them in a sense. And they feel it as this, attack instead of a guiding place that's just rearranging things in the way that they don't understand yet. And, I think it's so, so powerful when we can remind ourselves and we can remind others that, we don't know everything about what's coming. We don't have that understanding. We might be able to feel pieces of it. But what we can do then is really deeply trust in our own abilities and in the universe's abilities to support and guide the way. And that really our goal is to just listen, right? And stop trying to know better and listen and receive what does come and kind of lean into that in a different way because I know for me that's the the magical synchronistic things that occur when I least expect it. And those are the
yeah,
really fun ones.
yeah. The older I get, the more I realize I know so much less than I thought,
Right?
and it's
Right?
wonderful. Because we how often do we get experiences of wonder
Yeah.
and awe? And when you think of those moments, you might think of moments in nature, moments of your young child doing something innocent or silly, right? These are the moments where we get to just sit back and be. And that's kind of all I'm seeking now is
Mhm.
that and
Mhm.
more of that. And
Mhm.
then and I can't predict that. I can't plan for it. It just
It was not a surprise then.
I want it to be a surprise. It's very joyful. And
But
something you were saying reminded me, I've been having this conversation with a friend about um, what it what it's like to sit in the unknown. I think we started with something like this
yeah,
too, talking about sitting in the unknown space and, not having clarity and being in with sitting with the discomfort.
yeah,
My dad does work, he's a psychologist, he does work with folks who struggle with anxiety and OCD. And part of what he is teaching over and over again, he's a world renowned psychologist, is we have to sit with this discomfort and the
mm,
not knowing. We cannot guarantee that all our family is safe all the time. We have
yeah,
to have these acts of trust that we've done the best we can. And there's nothing to do right now but sit and embracing the discomfort and recognizing it in our bodies and going, okay, it's living there in my stomach or in my chest. I'm going to just feel that and be with it. And chances are down the road, it just kind of dissipates.
yeah. No, it's totally true. It's the discomfort of the unknown, which is a version of darkness in itself. And, and then there's being able to sit in that and allowing that to really become a place that doesn't cause anxiety anymore, that we just go, okay, this is where I surrender.
Yeah. And those deep roots that we've grown without, not by our own choosing, by all of these things that happen to us. And instead of, going, why did this happen? Which of course is a natural question, but embracing it and saying, okay, this happened.
Yeah.
What's next? What am I doing next? And when you eventually kind of emerge from the darkness, the tree can grow that much higher. It can grow that
Exactly.
much wider. The branches are stronger and the roots are still there. So you can tap into that place anytime, hold space, but your leaves, your um, foliage is brighter and more beautiful because of all that you've experienced. So,
Yeah, and more visible to others. And, trees have a root network too. So, I mean, we can keep going with the analogies and all of
like,
the ways that support people, right? Because they actually communicate through their roots as well as being more visible. And,
I love.
all of those things I think is really such, it's the blessing and the awe in all of these pieces. Right. That's why we edit. It's all good. But anyway, so yes, the blessing in all of these pieces is, to me, that's where the awe, that's where the wonder, that's where the beauty is. And I just, honestly, I honor your journey so much. And I would love for you to share for the listeners how they can get in touch with you. I know you have a book coming out. I would love for you to share.
Yeah, of course. Well, so much of this journey is in my book. This first book that I wrote is called Afternoon Abundance. It is out now, actually. It came out in September. It's a poetry collection. And it is about that raw unearthing of all of these emotions we've talked about. And it deals with grief, it deals with loss, but it also deals with shadow and elements of our life that we just don't want to look at. And so I really brought all of that into the light. And then it follows the metaphor of um, a vibrant, colorful existence beyond that once all of those things have come into surface, and how we like embrace these parts of ourselves that are darker, and we bring them into like integration with our bodies. So it's Afternoon Abundance. You can find all the links on my website, which is fosterwilson.com. But it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much wherever books are sold, and some local bookshops here in Los Angeles as well. And then I have 2 more books coming out in 2025. So if you're on my newsletter, you'll
Amazing.
hear about all that.
Amazing. Well, that is super exciting. And, I have one book, but I have more books in me. So you are inspiring me to keep going.
Let's do it. All the books. Love it.
Right? Well, and it's so healing to not just speak it out, but to write about it, to share, and to know that it's another thread that can help reach somebody else too.
Yeah, that is my hope. So thank you so much for having me. And
Yeah,
thanks for having this conversation. I feel like I could talk to you forever.
I know. I know. I'm really enjoying the people who are finding me to be on this show. I'm really playing within the magnetism of what I'm bringing forward, and I'm having the best time in the awe and wonder of who appears in my inbox and the
Yeah.
connections that we have and the ways that we share experiences and the ways that they're different, but we all seem to come to a very similar place at the end. We come, and not that the journey is over, but through the adversity and through the darkness, we all seem to come to this new place of understanding. And it's a place of very little judgment of anybody's experience, because we've been deep in the darkness and we don't have any, there's no finger pointing or blame or shame for anybody who's experiencing any version of it, because even if it's not exactly the experience we have, we know how dark it gets. And, we come to this new understanding, no longer there ourselves, but embracing the multidimensionality of the way this, entire experience is being formed for us. And, I find it really beautiful in a lot of ways, the colorfulness of all of it, and the way that we can now connect in different ways, and the way we can invite others to really dig up some of these pieces that they've buried away and embrace that in themselves, because the ripple effect is just so profound. And I personally believe that the more moms, especially, that we reach, the more kids we reach, and the faster things really shift around the world in a different way.
Yeah, you're doing that great work of bringing everything into the light for us all to look at and to connect over, and to realize we are just all more connected and similar than any media outlet would tell us that we are.
Right. I'm done with the division. I'm done with the political, there's so many divisions in the world right now. And it's, to me, like, it's not one side versus the other. It's that the division itself is the problem. And we need to stop looking at me versus them in any capacity, and recognize that this whole experience is so deeply connected. And, the things that trigger us and other people are the invitations for self, and right? How this whole thing works together. And I just love connecting with people just like you, who are on this journey and are willing to bring, their darkness to light and share it in so many different ways. And just thank you so much for your time and your story and the work you're doing as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad we are so aligned in so many ways. I think it's just an example of, like you said, what these root systems underneath us all, which is, I'm adding that to the metaphor. I love it.
Yes, I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you again. And listeners, I will see you next week. Thank you for joining us on Awakened Motherhood. I hope today's episode inspired you and offered support for your journey. Remember, your story has the power to ignite change, and your resilience is a testament to your strength as a mother. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with other mothers who might benefit from our stories of empowerment and healing. I invite you to connect with me on social media platforms at Amanda Quick Healing, or visit my website, amandaquickhealing.com, for more information on other ways to work with me. Until next time, keep embracing your divine self and discovering your warrior mama within. Thank you for being part of Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.